Welcome to the 9th video in this series of short videos I'm recording in honor of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and the release of my most recent book. If you haven't had a chance to watch the previous videos, I invite you to do that. You can find them on my YouTube channel, on my website, on my TikTok, and so on. As usual, I'm going to begin with a brief quote and then say a few words about it. So the quote I'm beginning with today is the following. We are told that America is divided and polarized as never before. Yet when it comes to many important areas of policy, that simply isn't true. Columbia Law professor Tim Wu wrote this in an editorial in 2019. Just a few weeks ago, there was another editorial, this one by Kristen Soltis Anderson, titled, Americans Are Not So Polarized, in which Anderson, a pollster, makes a similar claim as Tim Wu. So what is going on? After all, the popular narrative in the media and elsewhere is that we are living in highly polarized times. And if you ask somebody on the street what's wrong with our system, you often hear that the problem is polarization. But as Wu and Anderson show, the data simply doesn't support that. For instance, Wu points to several policy areas which are supported by supermajorities. For example, 9 out of 10 Americans back Medicare negotiating for lower drug prices. 8 out of 10 favor net neutrality. 7 out of 10 approve for higher taxes for the ultra-wealthy. 3/4 believe we should be able to buy drugs imported from Canada. And likewise, Anderson says, quote, few Americans live in the extremes. In my data, and this is Anderson's data, she's a pollster, only 13% of Americans hold views that could be categorized as strong liberal and only 11% as strong conservative. But it is the remaining 3/4 of Americans who are fascinating to categorize. They defy what many people think of as America's political center. Given these numbers, if the problem we're facing is not polarization, what is it? And maybe we're asking the question wrong. Maybe as opposed to asking why people are so polarized, we should be asking why the government is incapable of delivering or acting on so many areas on which Americans, by wide numbers, agree. Why are the wishes of and the policy aspirations of the vast majority of Americans so often ignored by their own government? And the answer is, it's the system. And I spent the last few videos talking about why the system was designed that way, why it was designed to frustrate majority rule and responsiveness. And of course, the answer is the framers designed the system this way in order to protect and preserve liberty. And how they achieved this goal was dividing power. And in the last couple videos, I mentioned that when they first began to serve in government after the Constitution was ratified, some of these same framers turned earliest public officials recognized the problem about how difficult it was to get things done, and they turned to institutions like political parties as a solution, or what I call a semi-solution to the problem. So in this video and the next few, I'm going to just say a few words about what this all means today, what this division means today when you look at specific policy areas. So the first one I'm going to talk about is immigration, which is a problem that has bedeviled America for decades. And what you see when you look at this mini case study is that the government is not responsive to the majority will. And that is an outgrowth of a system designed for just that purpose. So for decades, Americans on the left, the right, Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter, all agreed that we have a problem with immigration. And when President Obama came into office in 2009, he came in, just like many presidents before him, promising that something had to be done to change this system. And yet, when he was in office for several years, he realized that regular order, meaning congressional passage of immigration reform that would address the problem, was not forthcoming. And eventually, so frustrated, he launched an initiative called We Can't Wait, which essentially meant that in the absence of congressional action to address this issue, which again, most Americans wanted to address, he was going to do what he could unilaterally, meaning via what we call EO, or executive office. And one of the steps he took via EO, the main one, was an executive order called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or what you may know of more commonly as DACA. And of course, it's well known that Obama was not alone in his efforts to address the problem unilaterally. So many presidents, from George W. Bush to Donald Trump and everyone in between, had done the same thing, tried to get legislation done, and in the absence of that, turned to unilateral action. And so what happens is, of course, that the problem can't be resolved by one EO or an action by one president. And when Donald Trump runs for president in 2016 and 2020 and 2024, immigration is one of the major issues on which he runs, promising finally to address the issue. And in just the first few months of his current administration, his second term, he has taken action unilaterally, again via EO, totally sidestepping Congress to do that. And whether you support the actions that Donald Trump or Barack Obama are taking on immigration via EO, the fact is that they are presidents who have a choice. Either try to respond to the majority by themselves unilaterally, taking executive action, or try unsuccessfully to push legislation through Congress. And so when we think about the impact of the division in the system, immigration is a good case study in the modern era of the fact that when vast majorities of Americans agree, Congress, what we might think of as regular order, has been unable to deliver, leaving presidents with a choice: either follow Congress and do nothing, or try to address the issue unilaterally, which can both be constitutionally suspect, as it usually is, and also ineffective from a policy perspective, because unilateral actions by EO can be easily overturned in the next administration and seldom address the root cause of the problem, which requires holistic action by Congress.